They offered her for half price, but no one dared bid until a lone cowboy raised his hand. The small town of Redstone lay quietly under the pale morning sun. Dust swirled in little whirlwinds across the streets, catching the light and making the air shimmer as if the town itself were holding its breath. Wooden buildings lined the main street, their faded paint peeling from years under the harsh sun. A gentle wind rustled the signs hanging from the doors, the general store, the blacksmith, and the little bakery where the smell of fresh bread still lingered from the early morning. The town had a slow rhythm, a kind of peacefulness that outsiders often mistook for emptiness. But for those who lived there, every corner, every creaking board, had a story. On this particular morning, a crowd began to gather in front of the small auction house at the end of Main Street. Word had spread quickly through the town about the upcoming sale, and curiosity had drawn people out from their homes. Farmers, ranchers, and townsfolk of all kinds ambled toward the building, some on foot, others on tired horses that had seen many years. There was excitement, but also a strange sense of tension. Something about this auction felt different, though no one could quite say why. Inside the auction house, the air was heavy with the smell of hay, horse sweat, and old wood. The floorboards creaked under the weight of boots and the occasional clatter of a dropped coin. Sunlight filtered in through tall windows, casting long patterns across the dusty floor. At the center of the room, a single horse stood tethered to a post and surrounded by a few assistants. She was a beautiful mare, though not in the way a perfectly groomed racehorse might be. Her coat was a soft chestnut dulled slightly by dust, and her mane had tangled in places where it hadn't been brushed in a while. Yet her eyes shone with intelligence and curiosity, reflecting the flickering light in the room like small amber lanterns. The auctioneer, a thin man with a sharp voice and a quick smile, tapped his gavel on the podium. "All right, folks, gather round," he said. His voice echoed slightly, bouncing off the wooden walls. "We have something special today. A fine mare, Bella. She's got history, she's got spirit, and she's offered for half her usual price." That's right, half. He looked around the room, letting the words hang in the air. Some heads nodded, others tilted skeptically. People murmured among themselves. Half price was tempting, but murmurs of doubt were louder than whispers of excitement. Bella had once been a champion, winning races in her prime and bringing pride to her previous owner. But time had taken its toll, and a recent illness had left her looking weaker than she once was. "Too old," someone muttered under their breath. Another voice said, "Not worth it." "She'll never race again." The skepticism spread through the room like wildfire, dampening the excitement the auctioneer had tried to build. Bella shifted her weight, her hooves scraping lightly against the wooden floor. She lifted her head and flicked her ears back and forth, listening to the murmurs, the quiet scuffing of boots, the creak of the beams overhead. She had been through much in her life, yet there was a strength in her posture, a quiet dignity that no illness or neglect could erase. She had learned to read the humans around her, to sense the moods of those who came near, and though she could not speak, there was an understanding in her eyes that suggested she knew more than the people gave her credit for. The room was full now. The townsfolk had crowded in, standing shoulder to shoulder, some leaning against the walls, others perched on the edges of chairs. Children peeked from behind their parents' legs, curious but cautious. The air was warm, tinged with the smell of horses, leather, and dust. Every eye seemed to be on Bella, yet there was hesitation. No one wanted to be the first to bid, to take the risk of investing in a horse that others had already deemed unworthy. A few men whispered quietly to one another, hands shading their eyes as they studied her. "She doesn't look like she'll last a month on a ranch," said one. His friend shook his head.
"Maybe, but maybe there's still something there."
You can't always tell. Their voices were low, uncertain, reflecting the inner conflict that many felt. Buying a horse was never just about money. It was about judgment, about trust, and about believing in something others could not see. The auctioneer tapped the gavel again, louder this time. "Do I hear $50? $50 for the mare." His voice cut through the murmurs, sharp and precise. But the room stayed silent. People exchanged glances, waiting to see if someone would step forward. One by one, the potential buyers shook their heads or shrugged. The price had been lowered to encourage a sale, yet still no one dared commit. Bella's ears twitched at every sound, her nostrils flaring slightly, as if she could smell the hesitation and fear of failure in the humans around her. Minutes passed like hours. The tension in the room was palpable. Some people tapped their boots impatiently, others chewed on the ends of their mustaches, thinking through calculations and risks. Bella shifted again, stamping a hoof, her soft whinny barely audible over the murmurs. She was nervous but not afraid. There was a calmness in her demeanor, a silent confidence that suggested she understood the world better than most who surrounded her. She had faced storms, illness, and the uncertainty of being sold multiple times before. She had survived because she had learned to trust herself, even when others doubted her. Outside, the sunlight grew stronger, casting long shadows into the auction house. Dust motes danced in the beams, twirling as if in celebration of the moment, or perhaps as witnesses to the quiet drama unfolding. The crowd grew restless. A few individuals started to murmur about leaving, thinking the auction would end with no sale. Others lingered, curious to see if someone brave or foolish would step forward. The tension hung in the air, almost thick enough to touch. Bella's presence was commanding in a quiet way. She did not neigh or rear, but her stillness and watchful gaze drew attention. There was a certain nobility about her, even in this moment of uncertainty. People may have judged her by her appearance, by the dust on her coat or the slight weakness in her steps, but there was something beneath the surface that refused to be ignored. She had a story, one of perseverance and quiet strength, waiting for the right person to recognize it. The auctioneer ran his hand along the gavel, a slight frown crossing his face. "Well now, seems like no one wants her at this price," he muttered. His tone carried a hint of frustration but also curiosity. Who would be bold enough to take the risk? Who could see past what was visible and understand the value of what lay hidden? His eyes swept across the room, resting momentarily on each face, searching for that spark of courage. Bella flicked her tail, shifting her weight from one leg to the other. She sniffed the air and twitched her ears, sensing the unease and uncertainty. She had been in situations like this before, where doubt and hesitation clouded the minds of those around her. Yet she remained calm, poised, and alert. There was a readiness in her stance, a quiet anticipation that something significant was about to happen. And indeed, as the minutes stretched and the crowd hesitated, an almost imperceptible change began to stir. The tension in the room was not just about fear of loss. It was about the possibility of discovery. Bella was more than a horse to be bought or sold. She was a challenge, a test of judgment, a reminder that sometimes the greatest rewards come to those willing to see what others overlook. The auction house remained silent now, the only sounds the soft shuffle of feet and the distant caw of a crow outside. Bella's eyes seemed to scan the room as if she were aware that someone would eventually notice her potential. Her chest rose and fell in slow, steady breaths. She was patient, as she always had been. She knew that her story was not over, that her worth would not be determined by the opinions of the hesitant crowd but by the actions of the one who dared to recognize it. The room grew heavier with silence as the auctioneer waited, glancing at the crowd with raised eyebrows. The murmurs had faded, replaced by a tense stillness. Every person in the room seemed to be holding their breath, as if waiting for a signal to act. Bella shifted her weight slightly, her hooves clattering softly against the wooden floor. She lifted her head, flicking her ears toward the faintest sounds, the creak of a chair, the shuffle of a boot, the soft whisper of a child's curiosity. Her eyes seemed to search the crowd as if trying to read their intentions. For the townsfolk, the moment felt almost unbearable. They had come expecting an auction, expecting a simple transaction of buying and selling. But the mare in front of them had a presence that was difficult to ignore. She was not just a horse. She was history, experience, and quiet strength rolled into one. Each person wondered in their own way. Could she still be useful? Could she still bring them honor, pride, or profit? Yet no one dared to make the first move. Some leaned closer to one another, whispering under their breaths. "She doesn't look right," one man muttered. "Not strong enough." Another, a taller rancher with a wide-brimmed hat, shook his head slowly. "Maybe she's fine for riding around the farm, but she's no racehorse anymore." Their voices carried doubt, yet beneath the words was curiosity, a hope that maybe someone would see what they could not. The tension in the room was almost tangible, pressing down like the summer heat outside. Bella's coat, though dulled by dust, seemed to glimmer faintly in the sunlight streaming through the windows. Her mane fell naturally over her neck, tangled but soft, and her tail brushed lightly against her hind legs. Every movement was graceful, measured, and full of quiet dignity. Even as the humans debated her worth, she held herself with a kind of poise that only experience could teach. She had seen hard times, illness, and neglect, but she had survived each challenge with a calm strength that commanded attention. The auctioneer tried to ease the tension, raising his voice slightly. "Do I hear $50? $50 for the mare?" His tone was sharp, yet polite, a mixture of encouragement and insistence. A few people shifted in their seats, but none spoke. The silence stretched, heavy and awkward. He lowered his voice and tried again. $40 then. Don't miss the chance for a fine mare at half price. Still, no hand went up. The crowd exchanged glances, some avoiding eye contact, others biting their lips to keep from speaking aloud. Outside, a faint breeze drifted through the town, rustling the wooden signs and carrying the smell of dry earth and hay. Inside, it was hot, and the smell of the horses mixed with dust and sweat, creating a heavy, almost suffocating atmosphere. Bella seemed unfazed, standing quietly, observing everything. She could sense the uncertainty, the hesitation, and the doubt. Her instincts told her that soon someone brave enough, or perhaps desperate enough, would step forward. She shifted slightly on her hooves, a soft sound that echoed in the quiet room. The murmurs began again, quieter this time, as people debated in hushed tones. "I don't know," said one man, scratching his beard. "Maybe she's past her prime." "You never know with a horse like this." His neighbor, a younger man with dirt-streaked hands from farm work, shook his head. "Or maybe she's worth more than we think. Look at her eyes. There's something there." Their conversation reflected the inner struggle of every person present. Some saw only what was visible: age, illness, and dust. Others sensed the potential hidden beneath the surface, waiting for the right person to notice. Bella's ears twitched as she listened to the whispers. She had learned over the years to read humans, to understand their moods and intentions. Though she could not speak, she could sense the fear of loss, the hesitation born of doubt, and the faint spark of curiosity. She knew that her fate rested not on the opinions of the many, but on the courage of the one who dared to act. Her chest rose and fell in calm, steady breaths, her muscles coiled lightly as if ready to spring into action when the moment came. Minutes passed, and the tension grew. Some of the townsfolk started shifting uneasily, crossing their arms or leaning against the walls. A few whispered about leaving, deciding that the risk was too great for them. Others lingered, drawn by curiosity, wondering who would be the first to take a chance. The auctioneer's frustration was beginning to show, though he kept a polite smile on his face. He tapped the gavel lightly, clearing his throat. "Well, folks, it seems we have a shy crowd today. Anyone willing to step forward for a fine mare at a fair price?" Still, no one moved. Bella shifted her weight again, stamping her hoof softly against the wooden floor. She flicked her ears, sensing the faintest change in the room. Something was about to happen. The crowd held its breath, each person waiting for the other to act first. It was a quiet standoff, a test of courage and judgment. The mare, patient and poised, seemed to know that her moment of change was approaching. Among the crowd, a few faces stood out. There was a middle-aged farmer with a worn hat, his hands rough and calloused from years of work. He glanced at Bella, then away, unsure if he should risk his money. A young rancher just starting his life frowned as he studied her. He could see the dust on her coat, the slight weakness in her stance, and he hesitated. And then in the back of the room, a lone cowboy leaned against the wall, watching silently. His eyes were calm, steady, and thoughtful. Unlike the others, he did not whisper or fidget. He observed Bella carefully, noting the subtle strength in her posture, the intelligence in her eyes, and the quiet grace that seemed to surround her. The cowboy had a reputation in town for being quiet and thoughtful. People often underestimated him, thinking his calm demeanor meant he was unremarkable. But those who knew him well understood that he had a keen eye for horses and a sharp mind for judgment. He had seen horses dismissed as worthless, only to rise to greatness under the right care. And as he studied Bella, he felt a spark of recognition. She was more than she appeared, and he understood instinctively that she had potential others could not yet see. The auctioneer tapped the gavel again, louder this time, trying to coax someone into action. "Do I hear $40? $40 for the mare?" His voice carried through the room, but again, silence. The crowd murmured quietly among themselves, debating, hesitating, unsure. Bella's ears twitched, and she lifted her head slightly, sensing the growing tension and anticipation. She shifted again, stamping a hoof softly, a small reminder of her presence and readiness. As the minutes stretched, the atmosphere grew thick with expectation. Every person in the room could feel it, the sense that something significant was about to happen, that the moment of decision had arrived. Bella stood calmly, her eyes alert, her muscles coiled lightly, waiting. She did not know who would act, only that the right person would soon step forward. The cowboy in the back remained still, his eyes never leaving Bella. He did not speak to anyone, did not whisper advice or try to convince others. He simply observed, his mind assessing every detail, the condition of her coat, the shape of her muscles, the intelligence in her gaze. He understood that true value was not always visible, that strength and potential could lie hidden beneath dust, illness, and age. And he felt a quiet certainty that this mare, though overlooked by others, was worth the risk. The room seemed to hold its breath, waiting. Bella's calm presence contrasted sharply with the restlessness and doubt around her. Children peered from behind legs, wide-eyed, sensing the unusual tension. Adults shifted, scratched their beards, and whispered quietly, each weighing their decision, yet none daring to act. The auctioneer cleared his throat again, his voice echoing slightly. "Well now, folks, someone has to make a move. Don't miss this opportunity." Bella's fate rested not on the doubts of the many, but on the courage of the one willing to step forward. And in that quiet room, the stage was set for a choice that would change everything. The mare, patient and poised, seemed to sense it too. She stood quietly, alert and ready, as if she understood that the moment of change was imminent and that soon someone would recognize her true worth. The quiet in the auction house was almost unbearable. The murmurs had faded, replaced by the tense, expectant silence of a crowd unsure of what to do. People shifted on their feet, leaned against walls, and scratched their heads. Some stared at Bella, studying every movement, every detail, as if hoping for a clue that might justify taking a chance. Others glanced at one another, exchanging uncertain looks, silently asking, "Who will do it?" But no one moved. No one dared bid. Bella's eyes, large and deep, seemed to follow every motion in the room. She had learned to read people over the years, to understand the hesitation and fear that often accompany decisions. She could sense that the moment was approaching, that soon someone would step forward to recognize her worth. Her muscles were coiled lightly, her posture steady, and her breathing calm. Though the humans around her were restless, she remained poised, a quiet strength radiating from her small chestnut frame. The auctioneer, a thin man with a nervous smile, tapped the gavel lightly and spoke again. "Well now, folks, we've got a fine mare here. Half price, a chance that doesn't come often. Who's brave enough to take a look at what others miss?" His voice echoed slightly, but the crowd stayed silent. He glanced around, frustration flickering across his face. He had expected more excitement, more competition. Instead, he saw hesitation, doubt, and fear. In the back of the room, the lone cowboy leaned against the wall, arms crossed, observing silently. He had said nothing up to this point, not a word. He did not need to. His eyes followed Bella's movements carefully, noting the subtle strength in her legs, the calm intelligence in her gaze, and the resilience in her stance. He had seen many horses in his time, horses that others had dismissed as past their prime, only to surprise everyone later. And as he studied Bella, he felt a quiet certainty. She was one of those horses. The crowd's whispers grew louder, though they still did not act. "I don't understand why no one is bidding," one man muttered, scratching his hat nervously. Another whispered back, "Maybe they're all afraid. Maybe they don't see what we see." The cowboy did not respond. He did not need to. He had made his decision, and all that remained was to act. He stepped forward slowly, deliberately, his boots making soft thuds against the wooden floor. Heads turned, and a hush fell over the room. People shifted uncomfortably, surprised that someone had finally moved. All eyes were on him now, and the tension grew heavier with each step. He did not hurry, did not speak, and did not glance around for approval. He simply walked toward the front, where Bella stood quietly, waiting. The auctioneer's eyes widened slightly. "Well, now, looks like we have someone," he said, his voice a mix of relief and curiosity. He motioned toward the cowboy. "Step right up, sir. What's your bid?" His words carried an edge of challenge, a test of the cowboy's resolve. The room seemed to lean forward collectively, everyone waiting to see if he would falter or if he would commit. The cowboy stopped a few feet from Bella. He reached out slowly, letting her see his hand, giving her time to recognize him. Bella lifted her head and pricked her ears forward, watching him carefully. There was no sudden movement, no rush. She simply observed, alert but calm, as if assessing the character of the man who had finally stepped forward. The cowboy spoke softly, his voice steady and low, though just loud enough for the auctioneer to hear. "I'll bid $35. A murmur ran through the room. $35 was not a huge sum, even at half price, but it was enough to show that someone believed in the mare's potential. The crowd reacted with surprise and skepticism. 35? One man muttered. "That's hardly anything," another whispered. "Brave or foolish, I'm not sure which." Yet the cowboy remained calm, steady, and resolute. He did not argue, did not explain himself. He simply held his ground, confident in his judgment. Bella shifted her weight slightly, her hooves making soft sounds on the wooden floor. She had sensed something different about this man. There was a quiet assurance in his movements, a calm confidence that was rare among humans. He did not hesitate, did not waver. And in that confidence, Bella recognized someone who could understand her, someone who would see beyond her dust-covered coat and her tired appearance to the strength that lay beneath. The auctioneer raised an eyebrow, adjusting his spectacles. $35, ladies and gentlemen." "Do I hear $40? His voice carried the hope that someone else might join the bidding, yet no one moved. The room was still tense, filled with people who were curious but unwilling to take the first step. The murmurs continued, soft and speculative, but the cowboy's hand remained raised, his bid firm. Time seemed to slow. Every person in the room watched the scene unfold, captivated by the quiet drama. Bella's eyes followed the cowboy, her head held high, her ears pricked forward. There was a connection, subtle but undeniable, forming between horse and human. It was the kind of understanding that transcends words, a silent agreement that this was the beginning of something important. The auctioneer tapped the gavel lightly, his voice now softer, almost encouraging. "Do I hear 40? Someone, please!" "Don't let this fine mare go to waste." The room was silent again. The tension was thick, almost suffocating. And yet, in the back of the room, the cowboy remained calm, his eyes fixed on Bella, unwavering. Finally, the auctioneer sighed and raised his voice once more. $35. Going once, going twice. He paused, letting the words hang in the air. Every eye was on the cowboy. Every thought in the room focused on the decision he was about to make. Bella's tail flicked slightly, a small, impatient gesture, as if she too sensed the importance of the moment. Then, with quiet certainty, the cowboy nodded slightly. $35, and I'll take her." His voice was calm, steady, and final. The room seemed to exhale collectively. Some faces expressed relief, others disbelief. No one had expected someone to act so boldly, so decisively, when all others hesitated. The auctioneer's gavel came down with a sharp crack. "Sold! $35! Going to the gentleman in the back!" The sound echoed through the room, and for a moment everything seemed to pause. Bella lifted her head, ears forward, and took a small step toward the cowboy. It was as if she understood that her life was about to change, that someone had finally seen her true value. People whispered and exchanged glances, some impressed, others still skeptical. "I can't believe it," one man muttered. "He actually bought her." Another shook his head. Brave, that one. Or maybe just stubborn. The cowboy ignored the comments, walking slowly toward Bella, extending his hand again. She stepped closer, sniffing his hand. Her muscles relaxed but ready. There was a quiet moment of connection, a recognition between horse and human that needed no words. He patted her neck gently, speaking softly. "Easy now, girl. We'll take good care of you." Bella nuzzled his hand lightly, her response calm and accepting. She had been through many hands before, many owners who had judged her by appearances alone, but this man was different. He saw beyond what was visible, and she trusted him immediately. The crowd began to disperse slowly, still murmuring about the surprising turn of events. Some shook their heads in disbelief. Others smiled at the unexpected courage of the lone cowboy. The auctioneer, though relieved to have finally sold the mare, couldn't hide a small smile of admiration. He had seen many auctions in his life, but moments like this were rare. A combination of patience, courage, and quiet understanding that changed the course of events in a single instant. Bella was led out of the auction house, her hooves clicking softly on the wooden floor, her tail swishing lightly. The cowboy walked beside her, calm and steady, guiding her toward the stable outside. Sunlight streamed in through the open doors, casting long shadows on the ground. The wind carried the scent of dry earth and hay, and Bella lifted her head, taking in the smells and sounds with quiet curiosity. As they stepped outside, the cowboy glanced around at the remaining crowd. Some waved, others nodded in approval, acknowledging the unusual bravery it took to act when all others hesitated. He returned their gestures with a small nod, his attention focused entirely on Bella. She was more than just a purchase. She was a partner, a living being with spirit and intelligence, and he understood that their journey together was just beginning. Bella moved gracefully beside him, her head held high, her ears forward, and her eyes bright with awareness. She had faced uncertainty, doubt, and hesitation in her life before, but now she had found someone who believed in her. The cowboy's steady hand on her bridle, his calm voice, and his quiet confidence created a bond that needed no words. Together, they walked into the sunlight, leaving the tense auction house behind, ready to face whatever lay ahead. The town would talk about this for weeks, maybe months. They would speak of the mare no one dared bid on, and the cowboy who saw something others could not. It was a story of courage, patience, and vision, a reminder that sometimes the right choice requires standing alone, trusting instinct, and recognizing value where others see none. The cowboy led Bella out of the auction house, the sound of her hooves echoing softly on the wooden floor and then on the dirt street outside. The morning sun had climbed higher in the sky, casting a golden glow over the town. Dust swirled around their feet, carried by a gentle breeze, and the faint smell of hay, earth, and horse sweat hung in the air. The townsfolk, still lingering near the auction house, watched in quiet curiosity as the cowboy and his new mare walked toward the stables at the edge of town. Bella's movements were cautious at first. She had been handled by strangers for much of her life, and she had learned to be wary. But there was something about this cowboy that felt different. His hand rested lightly on the bridle, his voice calm and steady, and his eyes gentle but alert. He spoke to her softly, a rhythm of words that she could not understand but could feel. "Easy now, girl. Easy." With each step, she seemed to relax more, her tail swishing slowly, her ears forward, and her muscles loosening from the tension she had carried. The stables were not large, but they were clean and well kept. Fresh hay had been laid in the stalls, and the scent of oats and straw filled the air. The cowboy led Bella into a stall near the back, away from the other horses. She sniffed the bedding carefully, testing the air and the space. Then, cautiously, she lowered her head and took a step inside. The cowboy followed, brushing his hand gently over her coat, feeling the warmth of her body, the strength in her muscles, and the rhythm of her breathing. Once she was settled in, he stepped back slightly and studied her. Bella looked around the stall, her large eyes reflecting curiosity and intelligence. She lifted one hoof and tapped it lightly against the floor, a small gesture that suggested both caution and willingness. The cowboy knelt down, resting on one knee, and spoke softly again. "Don't worry, girl. You're safe now. I won't hurt you. We'll take it slow." His words were calm, filled with reassurance, and Bella seemed to understand. She lowered her head slightly, nuzzling his hand, a small sign of trust that spoke volumes about her character and her ability to read humans. Outside the stable, the town was slowly returning to its usual rhythm. People who had witnessed the auction whispered to one another, amazed at what had just happened.
"I still can't believe he bought her," one man said, shaking his head.
"She looked done for. Sometimes it takes someone with real eyes," another replied. "Not everyone can see what's hidden beneath the surface." The cowboy's decision was the talk of the town, a mixture of admiration, skepticism, and curiosity. But none of that mattered to him. His focus was entirely on Bella. For the next few hours, he worked quietly with her, letting her adjust to her new surroundings. He offered her water and a small amount of oats, observing how she reacted. She drank carefully, testing the water with her lips, then took a few cautious bites of the food. The cowboy stayed calm, speaking softly all the while, guiding her gently but never forcing her. He understood that trust could not be rushed. It had to be earned, one small step at a time. By the afternoon, Bella had begun to relax. She moved around the stall with more confidence, sniffing the corners, testing the boundaries, and responding to the cowboy's voice. Her ears twitched attentively whenever he spoke, and she began to follow his gestures and instructions. It was clear that she was intelligent and perceptive, capable of learning quickly, and that her past experiences had made her cautious but not fearful. She was a horse who had endured much, and yet retained a quiet strength and curiosity that made her remarkable. The cowboy decided it was time to take her outside for a short walk. He led her gently out of the stall, letting her feel the soft dirt under her hooves. The sunlight warmed her coat, and the breeze carried the sounds of the town, the distant call of a rooster, the soft clatter of a wagon on the road, and the occasional shout of a child playing nearby. Bella lifted her head, ears pricked forward, taking in the sights and sounds with alert awareness. The cowboy walked beside her, holding the reins lightly, allowing her to explore, but maintaining gentle control. Their walk was slow and deliberate. Bella sniffed at the fences, examined the stable doors, and tested her footing on the dirt paths. The cowboy spoke softly all the while, giving her confidence with his voice and movements. "Good girl. That's it. Take your time." He understood the importance of patience. A horse that had been doubted and neglected needed reassurance, not force. Bella seemed to understand this instinctively, her steps becoming more relaxed, her head held higher, and her tail swishing more freely. As the afternoon wore on, the cowboy began to notice subtle changes in her demeanor. She walked with more purpose, lifted her legs higher, and even gave a small trot when he gently encouraged her. Her coat, though still dusty, seemed to glisten in the sunlight, reflecting a vitality that had been hidden under neglect and doubt. Her eyes, bright and intelligent, followed him attentively, responding to his cues and signals. There was a growing bond between them, unspoken but undeniable, built on trust, patience, and understanding. Back in the town, the auction house had emptied, but the story of Bella and her new owner spread quickly. People spoke in hushed tones about the cowboy who had seen what others could not, who had stepped forward when everyone else hesitated. Some admired his courage, others questioned his judgment, but all agreed that it was a bold move. Children pointed and whispered excitedly, imagining what adventures the mare and her new owner might have together. Even the auctioneer, who had been frustrated by the initial lack of bids, could not help but smile at the outcome. It was a story worth remembering. By evening, the cowboy decided to take Bella on a slightly longer walk to the nearby pasture. He wanted her to stretch her legs and get used to moving freely again. The pasture was open and gentle, with soft grass and a small stream running through it. Bella stepped cautiously at first, sniffing the air and testing the ground, but soon began to move more confidently. She trotted along the soft earth, lifted her head to catch the scent of the wind, and even galloped in short bursts, showing a strength and energy that had not been expected. The cowboy walked behind her, keeping a careful eye on her movements. He did not rush, did not push her beyond what she was ready to do. Instead, he allowed her to discover her own strength, to regain her confidence naturally. Bella responded to this approach with growing trust. Her ears twitched in response to his voice, her hooves moved with purpose, and her eyes shone with alert intelligence. The bond between them deepened with every step, a quiet understanding forming that would guide their journey together. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the pasture, the cowboy and Bella returned to the stables. She moved with a sense of calm satisfaction, her body relaxed but strong. The cowboy brushed her coat, checking for any signs of discomfort or fatigue, and offered her a small reward of oats. She ate carefully, her eyes occasionally lifting to meet his gaze, a silent acknowledgement of the connection they were forming. That evening the cowboy sat quietly outside the stable, watching Bella as she rested. She had faced uncertainty and doubt all her life, yet here she was, standing confidently beside him, ready for whatever came next. He understood that their journey together had only just begun, that trust and patience would continue to be the foundation of their relationship. But he also knew that he had made the right choice, that he had seen her worth when others could not, and that together they could accomplish much. In the town, people continued to talk about the auction, but the focus had shifted. It was no longer about the mare's price or her past. It was about the courage to act, the ability to see value where others saw none, and the quiet wisdom of recognizing potential in unexpected places. The cowboy and Bella had become a symbol of trust, patience, and vision, a reminder that true worth is often hidden beneath appearances, waiting for the right person to recognize it. By the time night fell, the cowboy and Bella were resting in the stable. The mare lay down for a short while, her breathing slow and even, while the cowboy prepared the stable for the night. He reflected on the day, on the auction, and on the bond forming between them. It had been a day of uncertainty, courage, and discovery, a day that would mark the beginning of a remarkable journey. And as the stars began to twinkle in the clear night sky, there was a quiet sense of promise. The mare, once doubted and overlooked, had found someone who believed in her, and together they were ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The sun rose slowly over the town of Redstone, painting the streets in shades of gold and orange. The quiet calm of the morning was filled with the sounds of birds singing, distant cattle lowing, and the soft rustle of wind through the dry grass. In the stable at the edge of town, Bella stirred, lifting her head and blinking sleepily. Her coat, now brushed and clean, shone softly in the early light, and her eyes reflected a sense of calm confidence. She had adjusted well to her new home, and the cowboy, who had won her trust, was already nearby, preparing for their first full day together. The cowboy led her out of the stable, his hands gentle on her bridle. The pasture stretched before them, bathed in sunlight, with soft grass underfoot and a small stream glinting as it wound through the field. Bella moved confidently, her hooves making soft impressions in the earth, her tail swishing lightly, and her ears pricked forward. She had regained a strength and vitality that had been hidden beneath years of doubt and neglect, and it showed in the way she walked, trotted, and occasionally broke into a gentle gallop. As they moved through the pasture, the cowboy observed her carefully. He was patient, allowing her to explore her surroundings, testing her steps without pressure, and speaking softly to reassure her. "Easy now, girl. We'll take it slow," he said, his voice calm and steady. Bella responded to his presence with trust, following his guidance without hesitation. There was a growing bond between them built on patience, respect, and understanding. The cowboy knew that this trust was precious, earned slowly and carefully, and he treated it with the care it deserved. Word of the auction and the cowboy's purchase had spread quickly through Redstone. People spoke in hushed tones about the mare no one dared bid on and the man who had seen her true potential. Some admired his courage, while others questioned his decision, unable to see what he saw. But the cowboy did not pay attention to the gossip. His focus was on Bella, on understanding her and helping her rediscover her strength. He had learned that true value is not always obvious, and that patience, care, and observation often reveal what others overlook. Over the next few days, the cowboy worked closely with Bella. He led her through gentle exercises to strengthen her muscles, guided her through short gallops to test her stamina, and introduced her to simple routines that helped her regain confidence. Bella responded quickly, her intelligence and willingness to learn shining through. Each day, she grew stronger, faster, and more graceful. Her eyes, once filled with uncertainty, now sparkled with awareness and energy. She had become not just a horse, but a partner, someone who understood and trusted the man who had believed in her when no one else would. The townsfolk watched as the mare and her cowboy moved through the fields together. Children pointed excitedly, whispering to one another, while adults nodded in quiet admiration. The story of the auction became a favorite topic of conversation, a reminder that courage, vision, and patience often lead to unexpected rewards. People who had doubted Bella's abilities began to reconsider their judgments, realizing that true potential is sometimes hidden behind appearances and that strength and value cannot always be measured at first glance.
As the days turned into weeks, Bella began to show signs of her true abilities.
She moved with elegance and precision, her muscles rippling beneath her coat, her steps confident and strong. The cowboy guided her through careful training, pushing her gently to rediscover the speed and endurance that had once made her remarkable. She responded with grace and determination, proving that the faith placed in her had been well-founded. Every stride she took was a reminder of her resilience, intelligence, and spirit. One afternoon, the cowboy decided to take Bella to the local racetrack for a test run. The track was familiar to the townsfolk, a place where many horses had proven themselves over the years. People gathered along the fences, curious to see how the mare who had been doubted by so many would perform. Bella stood at the starting line calm and poised, her ears forward, her eyes bright with anticipation. The cowboy gave a quiet command, and she sprang forward with effortless grace, her hooves pounding rhythmically against the soft dirt, her mane flowing behind her. The crowd watched in amazement. Bella moved with speed, precision, and determination that few had expected. She navigated the track with ease, responding instantly to the cowboy's guidance. Each lap demonstrated her strength, endurance, and intelligence. People who had whispered doubts now whispered admiration. "Look at her!" one man exclaimed. "I never would have believed it." Another nodded in agreement, saying, "That cowboy knew what he was doing." "She's incredible!" Bella's performance silenced any remaining skepticism, proving that true value often lies beneath appearances, and that courage and insight can uncover hidden potential. After the test run, the cowboy led Bella back to the stables, her breathing steady, her muscles relaxed but powerful. He brushed her coat gently, checking for any signs of strain, and spoke softly to her, praising her efforts. "Good girl, Bella. You did wonderfully." She nuzzled his hand, a silent acknowledgement of their partnership and trust. The bond between them had grown even stronger, built not just on training and guidance, but on mutual respect, patience, and understanding. In the weeks and months that followed, Bella continued to improve under the cowboy's care. She became a familiar sight in Redstone, galloping through the pastures, racing along the tracks and demonstrating her skill and spirit. People who had once doubted her began to admire not just her abilities, but the quiet wisdom of the man who had believed in her. Children followed her across the fields, watching in awe, while adults nodded respectfully, recognizing the courage it took to see potential where others saw none. The cowboy and Bella formed a partnership that went beyond horse and owner. They shared a quiet understanding, a bond that needed no words. He knew when to encourage her, when to give her space, and when to guide her gently. She responded with trust, intelligence, and dedication, showing that faith and care could bring out the best in someone, or something, that had been overlooked. Together they faced challenges, overcame obstacles, and demonstrated the power of patience, observation, and belief. As the sun set over Redstone one evening, the cowboy and Bella stood in the pasture, the golden light reflecting off her shining coat. She had come a long way from the dusty auction house where no one dared bid on her. Her eyes, once uncertain, now sparkled with confidence and trust. She had proven her worth not just to the townsfolk, but to herself, showing that resilience, intelligence, and determination could overcome doubt and neglect. The cowboy watched her, a quiet smile on his face. He understood that their journey had only begun, and that together they could achieve much. He had taken a risk when others hesitated, believed in her when others doubted, and guided her with patience and understanding. Bella had rewarded that trust, showing strength, spirit, and the kind of intelligence that made her remarkable. The town of Redstone never forgot the story of Bella and the cowboy. It became a tale told over fires, in the general store, and among families for years to come. People remembered not just the mare who had been offered for half price and overlooked, but the man who had seen her true value. It was a story of courage, insight, and the quiet wisdom of recognizing potential in unexpected places. Bella continued to thrive, her days filled with exercise, care, and attention. She ran across the pastures with ease, galloped along the tracks with grace, and responded instantly to the cowboy's guidance. She had become more than just a horse. She was a partner, a symbol of resilience, and a living reminder that true worth is often hidden from the eyes of the many, revealed only to those willing to see beyond appearances. The cowboy and Bella remained inseparable, a team built on trust, patience, and understanding. They had faced doubt, hesitation, and uncertainty together, and emerged stronger for it. The townsfolk who had once whispered skepticism now watched with admiration, seeing firsthand what could be achieved when courage, vision, and belief meet intelligence, determination, and resilience. Even years later, people would speak of Bella and the cowboy as a legend of Redstone. It was not just a story of a horse who overcame doubt, or a man who acted when others hesitated. It was a story of patience, trust, and the quiet power of recognizing value where others see none. Bella's life had been transformed by a single act of courage, and in turn, she transformed the lives of those around her, teaching a lesson about strength, partnership, and the importance of seeing potential where it is least expected. In the end, Bella and her cowboy thrived together. Their partnership was a testament to the quiet strength of patience, the courage of conviction, and the enduring power of trust. The horse who had once been offered for half price, doubted and overlooked, became a symbol of hope, resilience, and the rewards of seeing beyond appearances. And the cowboy, who had stepped forward when no one else dared, proved that courage and vision could change a life, not just one, but many, through example and action. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the pastures where Bella grazed peacefully. The cowboy sat nearby, watching over her, reflecting on their journey. It had been a day, a week, a life of patience, trust, and quiet courage, and together they looked forward to many more days of partnership, adventure, and mutual respect, a story that would be remembered for generations to come.